savage shores of the New Jersey coast. His work speaks truth to power and challenges us to take meaningful action. Let's give it up for Jim.
Good afternoon, New York City! My name is Jim Keady, and I'm very happy to have traveled across the river from the great state of New Jersey to stand up and speak out with all of you. As a die-hard New Jersey resident, I cannot say how proud I am of New Jersey's favorite son, Bruce Springsteen, who used his platform and his tour the other night to say that Trump was corrupt, incompetent, and treasonous. And as a fellow resident of the Garden State and a former councilman in the great city of Asbury Park, where Bruce began his music career, I stand in complete solidarity with the boss. And that is why we all must say, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. The Trump fascist regime must go now. I want to thank all of you for coming out today, for demonstrating the courage we need in this moment, for standing up and speaking out, and for demanding that the Trump fascist regime must go. Last month, I spent some time in Germany. Now, while most people try to spend their vacations on the beach, sipping cocktails, I went to Germany in part to immerse myself in trying to understand the rise of authoritarianism there in the 30s. An authoritarianism that metastasized into the Nazism that we all learned about in our high school history classes. An authoritarian fascism with a racist and white supremacist bent that brought forth the horrors that were rained down on the world by Hitler and the Third Reich. Sounds like a fun vacation, right? Historians will tell you that at times history repeats itself, but much more often the past simply rhymes with the present. It's not always apples to apples, but it is all historical fruit. And this is why I want to be clear that I am not calling Trump Hitler, nor I am calling his followers Nazis. I think we do a disservice to our organizing efforts when this is done. Trump is Trump. Hitler was Hitler. Now, to be very clear, Trump is absolutely an authoritarian fascist in his own right. And an overwhelming majority of his followers are fascist Christian nationalists who are hell-bent on stripping our republic of democratic ideals, institutions, and norms. And it is our moral responsibility to stand up and stop them. During my trip to Germany, one of the places I visited was Dachau. It was my second time there. My first time was when I was 22 years old and fresh out of university. It had an impact then. But this time, in these times, it just landed differently. For those unfamiliar with Dachau, it's about 45 minutes outside of Munich. It was the first camp established for political prisoners by Hitler and the Reich. It went up just weeks after Hitler was appointed chancellor, and once he was in power and it was set up, it was a place that was utilized to sweep up and detain anyone deemed an enemy of the state. Dachau became the model for all later concentration camps, and it served as a school of violence for the SS. Over its 12 years in operation, 200,000 people were in prison there, and 41,500 were murdered there by the Nazi regime. As you go through the educational tour at Dachau, and if you do any follow-up reading, I highly recommend The Coming of the Third Reich by Andrew Roberts. You start to see the historical rhymes, the horrifying parallels that exist between that time and the time in which we find ourselves. What are these parallels? Authoritarianism with the path being established for a dictatorship. Suppression of opposition, and this is only the beginning. A cult of personality, they self-define as MAGA. Extreme nationalism, rejection of democratic ideals, the desire for a strong leader, a father figure. These were all themes that were evident as part of the education I received at Dachau, and they are all evident right now in our United States of America. In our situation, Dachau is not 45 minutes outside of one of our major cities. It has instead been outsourced to El Salvador, in el Centro de Confinamiento de Terrorismo, the terrorist confinement center, a prison of brutality and gross human rights violations. It is there that the first group of people have been sent out of the United States without due process. It has been through the Trump regime's machinations with these individuals that they are testing fascist tactics, rhetoric, and establishing new and wildly dangerous political and legal norms. Even if one accepts the premise that the Trump administration puts forth that all of the people sent to El Salvador were dangerous, violent criminals who were here illegally, even if individuals who meet that description deserve due process under the law.
Right.
In response to hearing this assertion, you sometimes hear Trump fascists say with anger, why? Why should we waste our tax dollars on people, those people, giving them the benefit of a trial? Just throw them out. If they only could, for a moment, set aside their anger, their fear, their hatred, and ask that question with a spirit of genuine inquisitiveness. Why? Why should we spend our tax dollars on giving all people the benefit of a trial, a due process, and not simply just throw them out? Because upholding the rule of law and giving every person who is in the United States, regardless of their immigration status, protection and due process under the law is what sets us apart from despot nations and authoritarian regimes. Maintaining this ideal is never a waste of tax dollars. It is one of the most critical parts of our constitutional republic, and it is an ideal that should be defended by anyone calling themselves a citizen and a patriot. Now, because not enough of us took to the streets when it was done to those folks, the Trump regime started going for the next group, students. Students who were here legally and who were righteously using their voices to speak out against the genocide that Israel is committing in Gaza. With regard to defending and demanding justice for these students, enough of us did come out. Enough of us did speak out. Because we came out, because we spoke out, we've seen the release of Runyesa Ostark, the student from Tufts University, who was snatched off the street by masked ICE agents. A student who was targeted simply because of an editorial that she wrote defending a free Palestine and criticizing the state of Israel. We've seen the release of Moshe Madawi, the student right here from New York City at Columbia University, arrested while attending an interview for his naturalization as a citizen. He too was targeted because of his pro-Palestinian activism. We've seen the release of Badar Khansuri, a scholar from Georgetown University, also arrested because of his pro-Palestinian activism. We have won these battles. How? We stood up, we spoke out, and we demanded justice. Now, I am sure that the pattern in these students' cases is not lost on you. The sad reality is that AIPAC and the broader Zionist lobby has wholly owned our government for decades. The brutal reality that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza and they are violating international laws by using humanitarian aid as a weapon of war. Thankfully, we are just now starting to see the tide change. They've lost the narrative. They're losing support in the halls of Congress. Their desire to maintain and uphold genocidal apartheid state cannot last. And the future will clearly show that anyone defending Israel's actions now is standing on the wrong side of history. These issues are all interconnected, authoritarianism, fascism, white supremacy, Zionism, Christian nationalism, and they have found a central organizing locus in the Trump regime. Coming back to the students, while we must rejoice in the victories that we won, we must be acutely aware that there are going to be many, many other battles we will need to fight. Just 2 days ago, across the river in New Jersey, I was outside the federal courthouse in Newark with an incredible coalition of hundreds of activists, faith leaders, trade unionists, and deeply concerned citizens who had gathered to voice our collective concerns about the arrest of Newark Mayor Ras Baraka. Mayor Baraka, as I'm sure all of you know, was recently arrested while exercising his rights and responsibilities as the mayor of New Jersey's largest city, and providing legal oversight regarding Delaney Hall, a notorious ICE facility operating in Newark. Anyone who watches the video of what transpired can see that Mayor Baraka was targeted by the Trump regime. In his own words, after leaving the courthouse, he said, "I was targeted. I was the only person arrested. I was the only person identified. I was the only person they put in a cell. I was the only person put in cuffs. The only person going through this humiliation." He went on to say, "We are fighting about a document that was created hundreds of years ago. It's called the Constitution of the United States, which gives everybody due process, no matter who you are, no matter what language you speak, no matter what your background is, no matter what your gender is or who you decide to love. The Constitution protects everybody. Once you step foot on this soil, once you reside in this country, whether you are documented or not, the Constitution protects you." Amen, Mayor Baraka. Amen. Sadly, Mayor Baraka is among only a small handful of elected officials in the halls of Congress and around the United States who have the courage to not only talk the talk, but walk the walk, to put his body on the line in resisting Trump's fascist regime. With the hope of changing this, with the hope of getting more of our elected officials to stand up and speak out and take direct action on behalf of justice, I must offer a critique and an invitation to our friends and allies who consider themselves political moderates. As you are now seeing, there is no moderate position in fighting against the authoritarian fascism that we are experiencing under Trump. We continue to hear so many saying, "Why aren't the Democrats fighting?" Why? Because you wanted and elected Democrats who are center-right moderates. These people were never fighters. They were puppets of transnational corporations and moneyed special interest groups. The overwhelming majority of these Democrats oversaw, with their Republican colleagues, the political prelude to where we find ourselves now. They show no guts to fight for Medicare for all. They show no guts to fight for a Green New Deal. They show no guts to codify Roe. They show no guts to fight for an increase to the federal minimum wage. They show no guts to fight for the bread and butter issues that would address the material needs of the poor, the working class, and the middle class. They showed no guts to stand up and say that children should not be bombed and starved to death. Instead, they worked to maintain the status quo. A status quo that allowed for the largest polarization of wealth, for the largest gap to grow between the rich and the poor since the Great Depression. And it is in this chasm of economic instability and injustice that a fascist populist like Trump was able to take power. Twice. So what do we do? The only way that the majority of our elected officials in the Democratic Party and any reasonable Republicans who are left will stand up and fight is if we, the people, lead them. This is the reality that each of us must attune with. Stop asking yourself, where are the Democratic leaders? And instead become a grassroots leader yourself. Independent of any political party. Be a citizen and lead from the streets. Start right in your neighborhood, doorstep by doorstep, block by block. Make connections, build community, build localized resistance groups. As Gandhi once opined, be the change you wish to see in the world. This is how we must fight. And what are we fighting for? The very founding ideals of our nation. This is what we are standing up and speaking out for. Demanding that truth, justice, freedom, and representative democracy are protected and promoted in these United States. These truths are at the heart of our Declaration of Independence. We now find ourselves in a time with an authoritarian fascist regime on the march. Daily they are working to consolidate power, to threaten and imprison dissenting voices, to strip away our rights, to demolish our democratic institutions. They want to bring us backwards to a time when a king ruled these lands. And we must say to them, with every fiber of our being, America has no kings! America! To fight back against this fascist authoritarianism, we must be willing to put our bodies on the line in nonviolent resistance. We must be willing to engage, not solely in rallies and marches, but to engage in nonviolent direct action. We must be willing to be met with violence by those who want to oppress us, to take their violence, and not only not strike back, but to not relent in our prophetic witness for truth and justice. We must be willing to be imprisoned for standing up and speaking out. We must be willing to risk our very lives in the same way that every person who put their signature on the Declaration